Well, it's been about a week now, and that's actually way more time than I really should have given her. It's been about a week since the Discord episode, and more than a week since her apology. Several episodes have gone by since I Love Kim Possible. A lot apologized for the controversy that made her entire team mad at her. And since that apology aired, she has not released any video reviews on any of the episodes. Not just missing some great pop culture references, but also missing a Discord episode. I think we can call it. The channel is officially dead. I was thinking of the possibility of taking her place, impersonating her, and doing the review the way she would have done it. But then I realized that's not really fair to KP, and I don't really have the energy or volume to go all crazy over Discord and to imitate her little hipster language of trying to be cool for all the young people. But I am good with pop culture references, so I'm going to run by you some of the pop cultural references that I missed during my episodes because I had to cut them for time or because I thought of them after the recording. In At Times There Are a Changeling. I have a bad feeling about this is a line that's been said multiple times throughout Star Wars. The mirror gag that Spite and Thorax do when Spite and Thorax both look identical to each other may have been originated who knows how far back in time, but it was very popularly used in the Marx Brothers movies, as well as in an episode of I Love Lucy when one of the Marx Brothers, Harpo, cameoed on that episode. The mirror gag has been used time and time again throughout Looney Tunes, Tiny Toons, Animaniacs, and other things of that nature, but it was very popularly done by Harpo Marx in at least two different incidences. When Discord was apologizing, he had this nice little Fonzie moment. You know, Fonzie from Happy Days, the way that he could never say sorry or say you're wrong. That saying the words sorry and the word wrong always made him sort of stutter and unable to fully get the word out. That was a running gag for the Fonz, and Discord repeats it here, only not as drawn out as Henry Winkler would have done. I've seen this plot done before in the episode Recess. In the episode Recess, TJ had to take a day stuck inside for whatever reason that I don't quite remember. And since he wasn't able to play on the playground, he was inside with a bunch of nerds who choose to spend their recess indoors instead of on the playground, and they spend that time playing a tabletop game similar to Dungeons and Dragons. And in that time, TJ came to respect the game and enjoy it. When his friends gave him a hard time for it, he tried to have nothing to do with it, but actually had to stand up for the fact that he really did enjoy the game and that these kids had a right to play it. In an episode of Hey Arnold, Gerald also became obsessed with a fantasy role-playing game, although one a little more Magic the Gathering style than Dungeons and Dragons. In this particular sequence, Arnold had to approach Gerald and tell him that it was wrong for him to be a nerd and unhealthy for him to be inside, and that he should give up card gaming and fantasy stuff that he enjoys and go back to playing stuff that normal kids play, like sports and football and baseball and so forth, which I think was actually the wrong message and kind of one of my least favorite episodes of Hey Arnold, even though it has a lot of nice references to fantasy gaming. We've seen this fantasy gaming thing a couple of times in Adventure Time when it's pointed out that Jake has an obsession with fantasy gaming and is a sore loser when he loses at the game itself. Gravity Falls also had some D&D in it in Dungeons, Dungeons, and More Dungeons, when the characters, two of them get sucked inside the game, and the other two who thought the game was too nerdy and lame had to save the first two who were trapped inside the game and had to learn how to play it and do things like use their imagination and take gambles. Perhaps the best place that this idea was done was in Japanese anime. Series like Dot Hat / Sign, where the characters are permanently trapped in a video game fantasy type area, as well as stories like Magical Shopping Arcade and Anabashi, where the character spends one episode stuck inside a fantasy Dungeons and Dragons style realm doing all of the typical stereotype things that happen in fantasy games. And even though the series itself can be a bit on the mature audience side, the jokes were still funny and worked for the most part. In Futurama, one of the direct-to-DVD videos also made references to Dungeons and Dragons, and some of the regular aired episodes that aired on TV also made Dungeons and Dragons references. There was a Simpsons episode where Bart was playing a fantasy game that was so popular, basically the whole town was into it, and Marge had to play the game and master it and get good at it so she could start spending time with Bart again. Dexter's Lab also had a D&D style episode where they played a game called Mazes and Monsters, and Dexter was a dungeon master who allowed things to get out of hand and started cheating throughout the game. I also saw the fantasy world thing happen in a story arc of Yu-Gi-Oh! and in an episode of Kim Possible. But the one that came closest to being to what we got in Dungeons and Destroyed was actually one of the Nickelodeon modern CGI Ninja Turtle episodes where the turtles encounter a mutant who has the power to warp reality and zaps the turtles into a fantasy game and forces them to play it with him so that he can be entertained and do the whole Dungeon Master thing. Strawberry Shortcake Berry Bitty Adventures, a series that's better than you would assume it is and is worth your time to watch it, had two episodes that remind me a lot of the recent season. The Very Best Biscuit was an episode very similar to 28 Pranks Later. It featured two characters getting into a pranking war with each other and taking those pranks a little bit too far. Some of those pranks were executed a little bit better than what they were in 28 Pranks Later, but the outcome is pretty much the same. There was also a Pranks Go Too Far and the result is zombies bit done before. Well, I thought this was an original idea by My Little Pony. It was actually originally done by Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. It took somebody else pointing this out to me because I'd forgotten about, but they did do a prank-based zombie invasion to scare Blue into stopping his prank war. So that was also done previously. The difference is Blue's a lot more arrogant, hyper, and annoying than Rainbow Dash, and truly doesn't learn a lesson. There's also in Strawberry Shortcake Berry Bitty Adventures the Berry Bitty Great Race, which was a chart racing episode. This kind of thing happened a lot in things like Hey Arnold and Little Rascals and so forth, but I did like the idea that another Hasbro show had also done the kart race episode. The difference is that Strawberry Shortcake's kart race was more like the My Little Pony episode A Heartwarming Tale, where all of the characters played roles in a story that was being told by another character, and we weren't seeing the actual people who were in the race. The other thing was that in that race, everyone was cheating except for the protagonist. In Kart Before the Ponies, all of the protagonists were cheating and no pony else was. The idea that a changeling can change was also something that we've seen twice with Star vs. the Forces of Evil. We saw the Reformed Villain episode with Lobster Claw, except in that episode he failed to reform and remained evil. And then we saw the Reformed Villain thing again with Buff Frog, when he suddenly became a father and had to take care of children, and it softened his whole attitude on the idea of being evil, and he learned to be friends with and even trust Star, Butterfly, and Marco. We also saw some really good evil reformation plots in Avatar The Last Airbender and Legends of Korra, and here's the series that I think did evil reformations the best of anything else. In Zuko alone, we see the beginning of a really heartfelt emotional journey for Zuko as he tries to give up his evil ways and find a new path for himself. Zuko's journey was a long one, and it took him many episodes before he finally became a hero and gained trust from the others. Florence could have gone the same way, but his plot chose to tell a story in 22 minutes, where Zuko's plot told a story over multiple episodes. We also see it in Legend of Korra to a point as well, when she brings the spirits back into the living world and tries to reintegrate spirits and humans so that they'd live together in harmony like they used to. We see a lot of examples of this attitude in Star Trek, multiple examples in fact. There are many Star Trek episodes, not just the Borg ones, but ones with Klingons and Romulans and Cardassians and all sorts of other aliens where they're constantly repeating the message of just because we are different and used to be enemies doesn't mean we can still be friends. So that idea has been around Star Trek a lot and is often being told better. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles also had something similar to Forax in the modernized Ninja Turtles, the one that airs on Nick and the CGI and everything, with the character of Leatherhead, a character who would brutally attack the turtles in a bolt-up blind rage, but could also be calmed down and reclaim his calm scientific mind and his friendly personality. SpongeBob SquarePants also did an episode where all of the characters dressed up as superheroes, just like how My Little Pony did that Paraponies episode. In fact, we've seen superhero teams in things like Fairly Odd Parents as well. There's been many times where characters on the show have turned into a sort of mini Justice League. And I think both SpongeBob and Ponies did a better job at being superheroes than Timmy Turner and his friends on Fairly Odd Parents. Anyhow, that's about all I have to say for that one. Thank you for watching and good night.